Hi, it's me from the Welcome to Wonderland podcast. Are you looking for the perfect blend of nostalgia and patriotism in your wardrobe? Look no further than ZJZ Designs, available now at zjzdesigns.com. Their exclusive t-shirt collection features stunning designs like the iconic Plymouth Barracuda print, taking you back to the golden era of muscle cars. Show your love for your country with their bold patriotic heart designs that stand out and make a statement. From car enthusiast to proud patriot, ZJZ Designs has something special just for you. Head to ZJZ Designs and elevate your style. Visit zjzdesigns.com or check the show notes.
The All About Nothing podcast may have language and content
that isn't appropriate for some.
Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, Nothingers, to another episode of the All About Nothing podcast. This is episode number 220. I am Barrett Gruber.
I'm Bill
Zach
Fry.
King.
You took a break. I didn't know.
Zach,
It was too long of a pause. I
Zach
thought he was waiting on me.
Zach got lost. No, that worked out. Please subscribe and share the show. That's how we get new listeners. Also, if you can, please consider supporting the show financially by visiting our website.
I swear to God, Bill,
link.
your pay is docked.
Oh God, to zero. Still,
And if you can, please
No more
consider supporting.
cold sandwiches.
If you can, please consider supporting the show financially by visiting our website and clicking on the support link. Also, if you can't do that, please drop us a review, hit 5 stars, give us a thumbs up, or leave a comment. All of that helps drive us up higher in the show podcast rating. So real quick, want to thank again John Kosas Jr., Broadcast and Media Relations Manager for the Columbia Fireflies, for our Nothing or Fire update. Also, 2024 Soda City Comic Con is coming up very, very soon. In fact, now that I think about it, when this episode drops, it is almost
It'll be
likely.
post.
Yeah, you know what? The Soda City Comic Con's happened. It was a lot of fun.
We were there.
There were
We
some
met. I'm starring in a movie now. I had no idea. Me and Sam Witwer got along really well.
What? No
I am now a voice actor. This is great.
Yeah, there were some notable things that happened. We'll discuss those at some point soon. Also, want to thank Stephanie Morton for being on the podcast with us earlier this week. We recorded that episode. We dropped it today from the day that this episode is being recorded. You can check out her episode or go to stephaniemorton.com. You can find links to all of her appearances, details, social media, all of that is available. So go check that out. All right. We are going to jump right into this. Our guest this week is Mal Hyman, who is the Democratic candidate nominee, actually, for the South Carolina Congressional District 7. Mal, thank you very much for being on the podcast with us. We were really glad that you could join us today.
Great to join you.
How is the campaign going?
Well, it's been night and day after Biden stepped aside and Kamala Harris headed the ticket. The energy in the 4 counties that I visited subsequent to that change has been markedly different. People are ready to volunteer. They're ready to fight. They see a sense of maybe that we can prevail. I think after the first presidential debate, a lot of people fell into not just a deep malaise, but a depression, and energy was low. So people are listening. You know, I like to clone myself. We don't have a tradition of activism in the state for a range of reasons. I've been a community organizer, a teacher for 50 years, taught in the prisons, taught in the public schools, have tried to do community organizing. We don't have a strong progressive alliance in the state. The Democratic Party is not what it could be and should be. For example, when you win a nomination, you don't get a call from Jim Clyburn. You're on your own.
Yeah.
There is no money. There are no resources from the state or from the national party. We don't have a strong labor movement in this state because it's a right-to-work state. At the outset of the campaign, we were calling for a day of prayer and song at the steps of the State House for children's rights. Marian Wright Edelman working with Martin Luther King, calling for all children to have a right to food, health care, housing, good schools, safe streets, clean air, and clean water. I use that in every speech. I deeply believe it. But it's hard to get ministers to step forward because within the religious community, there's not a tradition of activism either. There was back in the 60s, but it's atrophied. So the major institutions, are not very supportive, and you just have to find a way to make it happen. everything critical is on the ballot this time, the most consequential election in our lifetime. So I quit teaching, and I tried running in 2016. And if you teach and run for office, there aren't enough hours in the day.
Yeah,
So we're
100%.
getting better hearing. Delighted to join you guys.
Yeah. So, teacher for 50 years, public education. You all, and you mentioned, like you mentioned, in the prison system. That is a very unique experience, and I think it probably gives you a pretty good perspective on what our prison system is here in South Carolina, and potentially even federally. So, what was your motivation for running for Congress this time?
Well, there's so many areas, I think, in this country that are crisis level, whether it's child poverty or climate change, or particularly after the insurrection, January 6th, democracy being on the ballot. We saw where Project 2025 was going. It just seemed that as a teacher, I needed to try to take it into the public square the best I could and try to raise the issues, and run as a progressive Democrat, but make clear to people that these are investments in America that'll make us more free, more secure, create more opportunity. And it just seemed like, go for it, grab the microphone and fight the best way you can. And being in a classroom, I fought that way for 50 years, and I love it. And I think you steadily get better at teaching, but it seemed like the public was at a critical crossroads, and I felt called to try to run and raise these issues publicly.
50 years is an incredible amount of time to be in education. I mean, Stephanie Morton, who we had on just the previous episode, she taught in Charleston for 27, 28 years. And I look at that as being outstanding, but so kudos to you for that. It's incredible. Go ahead, Zach.
Being a teacher for 50 years, you know how to deal with knuckleheads. So when you come across these people who you used to just label as right leaning, you're conservative people, but now you deal with the knuckleheads, the people who pick up the Trump flag and run with it. How do you approach that? Do you have an intellectual approach, or maybe how do you deal with that?
Well, you want to establish trust and credibility, and you kind of assess the amount of time you're willing to commit to it. I think there's a cult following. The propaganda being used on Fox, One American Network, on the far right is right out of Germany in the 1930s. It's not just the big lie. They realize you can lie faster than the fact checkers. You demonize your adversary as the enemy of the people. We've been hearing that for years. You constantly attack. You never admit that your adversary does anything right. A lot of MAGA people, in fact, most of them that I've talked to, don't even realize there was an infrastructure bill that the Chamber of Commerce has wanted to get passed for the last 30 years. They're really fed a very significant and effective form of propaganda. And it's tough to break through that, because if they start to admit that you're right, then they've been wrong. They've been made a fool of. Their friends are wrong. The people they love are wrong. And it's deeply unsettling. So it takes a lot to deprogram somebody from this cult following. And Trump should have been labeled Don the Con long time ago. Reminds me of cons that I taught in the prison way back in 77 through 82. He'll lie straight-faced. He's very good at it. He's not afraid to do it on any media outlet. And he knew damn well early on that you can lie much faster than the fact checkers will catch up with you. So this body of lies that continues every day has fooled people. And it's fooled them deeply, so that it takes a long time, once you establish some credibility, to have some of these observations start to break through. And I fear that, the country of Taiwan has a minister for cybersecurity because there's so many Chinese cyber attacks. But one of the things they talk about, which is interesting, that you guys may not have heard and your listeners may not be aware of, polarization attacks coming from the Chinese government into Taiwan. And essentially what that does is it divides the country. And that's what's being done in the United States. So people aren't listening to each other. And we know this election is going to get more and more shrill. It's already Tampon Tim and all the work that Tim Walz has done. And it's been a terrific, couple terms as governor in Minnesota gets boiled down to one denigrating line that's already repeated in barbershops anecdotally. So they're quite good at this.
Yeah.
Oh, so also, how would you say, especially running your campaign, have you tried to bring more people from the right to the left? Have you met anyone that has been concerned about stuff who has decided to change their values and vote for someone like you?
I'd like to say yes, but I really don't think so, because it takes a while to make that attitude change and to build credibility, and it's very threatening to people. Standard wisdom in the election cycle is to reach those that are reachable, especially on minimal resources. Now, I try in a classroom, to work with this crowd, and I found that good documentaries are very effective because they lay out a counter narrative and people can understand it. And they come to it at their own pace, when they aren't having problems at work, with family, with their coach, whatever, with girlfriends. And you never know when you start to make that breakthrough and people are starting to listen more critically, because it kind of scares people to have a different worldview.
Absolutely. You said the key word there.
Yeah. So as much as I'd like to say, I brought over a number of people, I think I planted some seeds, perhaps created some credibility so people recognize that, I frame this as common sense for the common good. When I talk about investing in children, I remind them the studies show that $1 invested in early childhood education yields about $7 in return. And if you're in business and don't invest $1 to get 7, you shouldn't be in business and you shouldn't be in government. Yeah. So I frame it differently.
And you talk about Tim Walz, and if Tim Walz was anywhere doing anything else outside of running against Donald Trump and that group, they would love him. He's a man who is a man of the people, had a military career, was for the children, all this stuff. But as soon as he runs against the status quo of the Republican Party, now he's an enemy.
Yeah, and they pick on things like, you mentioned Tampon Tim. Well, that comes as a result of the fact that during his tenure as governor, the legislature was able to push across a bill to his desk that put feminine hygiene products in schools where they are absolutely useful. But the thing that people keep picking up on isn't they don't seem upset about the fact that they're available in the girls' bathrooms. They're upset because they're available in the boys' bathrooms. And I think it's important to note, I've looked at the legislation. There isn't anything in it that required schools to put them in the men's bathrooms, but it was an option. And some of the schools took advantage of it, not because they wanted boys to have them or use them or transition them through some sort of weird magic, but it was because there was I think what was noted was that in some cases it was good knowledge. It was good knowledge for because that allows for men eventually to have some sort of empathy for what it is that women have to have in order for them to maintain not only their health but comfort. So it wasn't, and I made a joke. I was like, well, public education school system, highly likely that maybe a guy would need it to put into a bullet hole because of,
the way that America goes. But even imagine you're a high schooler and your girlfriend needs one and you're the one who can get out of class real quick and go grab. Like, where's the trouble in this? There is none.
It's
The trouble would be
non-controversial.
me and my friends just emptying them out to use them for whatever shenanigans. Like the worst thing is a prank. Like,
Yeah.
I don't.
Kids are shoving them up their nose.
Yeah, like
Non-controversial
there's no
in
there's no
Minnesota.
harm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're just looking
It's
for
a
whatever they
non-starter.
can because they don't really have any record to stand on. You know, if you go right down the line, they have not helped working people. Now they claim to not tax tips. You know, I mean, that's as good as they can come up with. Although we're now facing, you know, a time we're coming up on Labor Day where the mainstream media, even the non-Fox media, probably won't talk about minimum wage on Labor Day. But if they do, we'll get one story and that'll be it. This is a disgrace to trap families in poverty. And Martin Luther King was really clear in '68 on this one. And I use this in the churches. He said it's a crime in this wealthy nation for people to work for starvation wages. And you factor inflation, the minimum wage today is lower than it was back then. And it rarely gets called a crime, which I think it is when you trap people in poverty, kids are in despair. And I can tell you from working in the prisons, they fall into despair pretty early. I remember playing basketball with the inmates one time. Just a short story on this. And everybody's exhausted. And I thought, hey, when did you guys just not give a damn about anything? You know, to try to understand hopelessness. 10, 11, and 12. Those were the standard answers. We lose them early. Minimum wage that traps families in poverty, puts them in despair and hopelessness, contributes to that. Contributes to crime, violence, drug abuse, pushing drugs. In LA, when I was teaching, 400 street gangs. It had been out of control for a long time. I heard so many guys tell stories of how they drifted into gangs and it's blood in, blood out. And you figure, okay, half of this is BS. But after you hear it over and over again, you realize that's the story on things. And we just have not strengthened the families to the point where they have dignity and hope. And it's pretty straightforward. And I got to say, everybody who teaches in prisons after about 6 to 8 months, where you get the culture, put people at ease, you get to talking to them, you have this political epiphany, there but for the grace of God go I. And you realize it in your gut.
No, and that's one of those things. You know, you mentioned prisons and gangs and that loss of hope. We had a discussion just a couple of weeks ago on specific to this, where one of the things that we acknowledged in that episode was that nobody joins a gang because they want to. They join a gang out of necessity for security and the ability to survive. And we as a country have created that necessity with how minorities have been treated, or how, you know, you mentioned minimum wage. Here in the United States, minimum wage is currently what, it's still $7.25 an hour.
Right. I think so. Yeah.
It's $7.25, $7.50.
It's also South Carolina still, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Check that.
So that's nationally. There are states that have increased it up to $15 an hour, but even $15 an hour is a bare minimum to what it takes for someone to survive. If you have two incomes of $15 an hour, you're still basically living in poverty, especially if you have children.
Absolutely.
You know? And every time I hear the conversation come up about minimum wage, and almost everyone that I hear that's against it almost always turns the corporations, McDonald's, Burger King, Best Buy, they turn these corporations into victims, like they're being victimized for being told, hey, there's a cost of living here and you're not matching it. So, but I'm always just dumbfounded. Go ahead, Bill.
Or no, you're right. I was going to say, or they'll call the people lazy. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people that own businesses around my town or just anywhere, they say everybody's lazy, nobody wants to work anymore, there's nothing people are going to do. And it's like, well, they're not. Most of the work you're wanting to do is hard manual labor. Flipping burgers is not easy. I work at my family's restaurant, and it's not an easy job working register stuff. It's hard manual labor. And you're not, most places, I will say, like, don't often advertise a $7.25 an hour minimum wage. Normally it's a little bit higher, but it's not, around here it's never going to be something like 15.
Hard. It's hard to believe that it would. It's hard to
Yeah.
believe that would.
And who would work for that? Who would work for $7.25 or $9-10 an hour? Like, you're stuck. You can't pay for an apartment
No,
each month doing
absolutely not.
Right, and you
Now,
need
and
along with the
there's
go ahead.
go ahead, Mel.
Well, along with the minimum wage, which isn't enough, you're going to need more low-income housing. The waiting list for low-income housing in big cities is about 5 years. You know,
Yeah.
it's infrastructure, creates jobs, creates dignity for families, creates hope. You know, it's something that we can do. You need to have health care for all. I see it as a human right. Other industrialized countries have that. And the argument I make is a little different on this one. In Canada, it's non-controversial because it saves money for businesses and everybody's covered. They had it since 1971. The business community was on board with it, and the business community in the United States is being gouged by the $4 trillion a year medical insurance industry. So healthcare for all gives dignity, hope to the poor because those concerns are taken care of, and it helps business. It would lower the national debt. So I tried to get Bernie's people to say it a little different way. And that's the way I think you have to make the argument. I stumbled on this because I could get most of my students to agree that people had a right to health care. But my country club kids in the back of the room paid attention when I said it was going to save businesses money. So I frame a little bit differently now. But all that's necessary along with a minimum wage that probably has to be $20 an hour or higher in New York, different in Charlotte, and then different in a town like Florence because the cost of
Right.
living is different.
Yeah.
We have weak labor unions.
Healthcare,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Healthcare is absolutely a scam in America because it's fallen to capitalism just as much as anything else, where you have your deductible, but then you have your out-of-pocket max, and then at the end of the day, you're like, well, now my insurance is really being insurance after I paid, let's call it $30,000, depending on what kind of health plan you have, and whatever your out-of-pocket max is. Then your insurance gets to decide if you truly need that surgery, right?
Yeah.
Why can't we just be healthy? Let's take a few aircraft carriers out. We have 11 or 12 now. Let's stick with 8. I don't know. We don't have to pay the military industrial complex so much money. We could take that and put it into healthcare.
Or even,
yeah, go ahead.
No, even like they'll try to charge you before you get to the hospital with ambulance rides. And my hometown here in Barnwell, I was talking to a firefighter today. They've had to essentially take up their firefighter departments and SUVs and all that kind of stuff that they have at the fire department to go do the jobs of some of the paramedics as getting them from their place to the hospitals, because in my hometown there's not even a hospital. You have to drive 15 minutes out towards Denmark, South Carolina to get to anything. And so fire department, like the ambulances, they're taken up or they're not being used, and so then they have to contribute. I mean, it's the healthcare in my area especially is awful. I mean, there's nothing.
And it's almost it's such a it's such an easy thing to fix. And I don't know if I proposed this, Zach. I think I've mentioned it maybe over the course of us doing this for the last 7 years. But I think one of the things that the federal government could do for every single state is, or do it at the state level, but everywhere you have a public library, directly next door to that, you put in a public clinic that does things that don't require surgery. So things like illnesses or lacerations, things, carpal tunnel syndrome, or somebody that needs treatment for something as simple as a head injury, things like this that don't necessarily require there being an actual operating room or an MRI machine. You could have an X-ray machine, but for these simple type procedures, you put a public clinic next to every single public library in this country. You take away the fear of how much is this going to cost me to be treated for something. As perfect example, and this is my anecdote, was a couple years ago, my one of my daughters fell off of a swing or fell off of a slide at Saluda Shoals Park over here in Columbia, South Carolina. and she broke her arm, broke both the bones in her left hand, required surgery. They had to set the bones. They had to put in metal. Ultimately, it was towards the end of the year, so our deductible had already been met, and it was expensive. It wasn't so expensive that it had a huge effect on us.
Did you meet your out-of-pocket max already?
Yeah, we'd already met that.
Okay.
So fast forward though to a year and a half later, when the parts that were put in had to be taken out. Now, I worked in insurance for more than 10 years. I worked for Medicare, so I recognize how there are procedures that occur where some of those procedures then have follow-up procedures that are covered under the original procedure. South Carolina doesn't necessarily hold a hospital to that or an insurance company to that. So I'm still working it out with the insurance company. I've already paid them, but I'm working it out because I don't want to have to pay for something that should be covered under the initial procedure. She is 10 years old. She can't keep that metal in her arm because what it does, and this is going to get kind of weird, but to have metal inside of your arm while you're still growing, your bones may grow stronger when you break them, and then they're set back. That is
Wolf syndrome.
It's a situation that does actually occur. The problem is if you have something harder inside of those bones, it creates these super weak points around what the titanium that was in her arm. So it had to come out. You couldn't leave it in. So I'm fighting the insurance company right now on having to pay for a bill for something that was covered under the original procedure because that original procedure had to be completed, but I had to pay for it. So these are things that our federal government and our state government allow for these. An insurance company is a corporation. They're not. I have no reason.
All of them too.
Yeah,
I have
so
many.
There's no evidence to show that an insurance company is there to help the people that it covers. They're not. They're there to make money, and they have figured out the best ways to do it, including partnering with hospitals and doctors on how to set the price for stuff. And then everybody gets to write it off, and you've got a Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts not paying any taxes because they've been able to write so much stuff off.
You can draw network lines, then you can draw HMO lines. You can, it is a genuine racket.
Yeah, directly to Wall Street. Publicly traded insurance companies. I mean, we have banks now that are getting involved. This is the craziest thing. We have banks that are getting involved in insurance, and we have insurance company that are getting involved in the banking system. State Farm, my family's been with State Farm for 75 years, and State Farm has a banking system. You can get a savings and checking account through them. You can get a credit card through. I mean, it's crazy to me.
You can earn rewards too, like a blender.
The lines are just crisscrossing, and there's no consumer protections anymore to keep these things at bay.
There's no shame in the companies at all. There's no shame. You're not even hiding what you're trying to be in this.
Mal, go ahead.
So think of the last time that you heard a story on Canadian healthcare that was an honorable story that was actually interviewing people with a very popular, non-controversial program that's been in effect since 1971. We don't hear it, just as we don't hear what they're using for healthcare in France. It was Michael Moore with Sicko, where he finally, puts it on the silver screen and people were able to wrap their head around it, and then they like it. 70% of the public agrees with us. We're fighting power politics, the poisons of money and partisanship in Washington. It's conservative Canadian businessmen that would not give up their healthcare system because they know it works and they know it's good for business, and they really don't want to relocate to the United States and incur those costs, whereas some American companies move to Canada because they're saving on operational costs. I mean, this is strangling the American economy. It's causing inflation, and it's running up the national debt, as well as causing more suffering. And it'll take a mobilization from the public, because we're not seeing it from the corporate-owned mainstream mass media, People don't get a picture of what the options are in other countries. We can look and you can buy a foreign wine or a foreign car, but you can't look at those social services that might be very successful and interview people, and they might talk about prison reform or what's going on with their schools or what's going on with healthcare. It's off the radar. That's why guys like you are vital for raising these issues in the United States.
Yeah. No, and you for running. I mean,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
haven't told us your age, but 50 years of teaching, I think, puts you into the upper echelon of the rest of us. You may be your age might be Bill and Zach's together, but regardless, you know, it takes people running and discussing these things. We're going to have David Robinson the second, who's running over here in Congressional District 2 for South Carolina against Joe Wilson, and we're going to have him on here in a few weeks. And same conversation. That his territory is considered to be much more urban because it makes up West Columbia, Lexington, and stretches over towards Augusta, you know, into Aiken and things like that. So it does have a lot of rural community to it, but it also has considerably larger cities. You've got your district has Florence, Florence, Myrtle Beach, North Myrtle Beach, Conway, Georgetown. So that is a lot of rural land. In your campaigning, what are some of the economic disparities for the rural areas that you're campaigning in?
As with the rest of the country, people who live in urban life don't really understand rural areas and vice versa. A lot of concerns are common. Healthcare is one of them. People want good education. They want clean air. They want clean water. Most want women to have reproductive rights. So there's a lot of commonality, but they do speak differently, have different cultures, and it is possible to communicate with them. What I'm noticing is I'm the first progressive to go into a lot of the rural black churches. That's like, oh, this guy gets it, and we can work with him. But Democratic Party's been very weak for a long time. We haven't had money from the national or state party to help out. The progressive network is relatively weak. So we got ourselves in a lot of problems here. Good people a lot of times don't run because it's tough to win, but the message is resonating. Problem is it's tough to win with retail politics when you have 8 counties. And that's why, I'm stuck on the phone 3-4 hours raising money. Don't particularly like doing it. I won't take any corporate or banking donations. You can't serve 2 masters. Everybody in the churches likes that. They'd like to have somebody independent who's just talking about common sense for the common good, kind of like Tim Walz talks. I mean, I think there's a desire both in urban and rural areas for someone like him. And I'm getting a pretty good hearing, even though I don't have a Southern accent. I'm from Southern California. Guys, I'm running out of power on my phone. Can I?
All right. Well, I got one more question for you, real quick. When you moved from Southern California to South Carolina, when was it a dotted thing? Was it direct or what?
Yeah, it had to do with my wife's health. Florence was home. Then I hired on at Coker University, teaching sociology and political science. And I soon realized they said, hey, you want to do human rights work in Central America or in Gaza and the West Bank? Just come back and give a little talk and write an article, and we want to support you doing that. So I found a home at a good small college, thought I'd raise my family there. No regrets. And that's what got me here, kept me here. And I grew to like and understand a lot of the good parts of the culture. And I realized that we can do a lot better. So I'm trying to do my part to change things.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you had a what the hell moment. Do you have a what the hell is this moment moving to the South?
Yes, absolutely. And I bit my tongue for quite a while to try to listen, just like I did when I was teaching in the prison, to try to figure out the culture. But I think I've mastered enough of it, and people really are congenial. You do pick your battles. So, I'm bi-coastal at this point.
Bi-coastal,
From
there you go.
California
I like
and
it.
Carolina.
Well, Mal, we'll wrap this up with you here real quick. I'll just say this: Mal Hyman for South Carolina Congress, or for Congress here in South Carolina, District 7, again makes up most of the east side of South Carolina. You can go to malhyman.com, find out about his platform, all of his information. You can donate. You can also volunteer. Phone banking is obviously an option, so do that. malhyman.com. Mal, I want to thank you very much for being on the podcast. We're going to get you on again here soon because we have to get you to go through our 7 questions for the episode. But
Yeah,
I look forward to it. Thanks, guys.
I want to thank Mal definitely for being on with us because I think he's an outstanding candidate. I've read a lot of what's on his website, and you can too. Did that sound audible? malhyman.com. So Mal Hyman for Congress, he is running for South Carolina's 7th Congressional District. So absolutely, please go check that out because as like he said, donations, volunteering, and the candidacy, the campaign has really just kicked off. So go check out malhyman.com. This is an indication of just how tired we are. So this episode's going to be a little shorter this week.
Barrett and I have been on the grind for a minute.
We've recorded 3 episodes this week, and next week, so we're recording this episode on August 14th.
Yes.
This episode will air, and we will put ourselves through the gauntlet because we will have done a live recording at Transmission Arcade. We will have done. I'm actually working with some friends. We're hosting David Robinson II, Congressional District for South Carolina, District 2, who's running against Joe Wilson. We're hosting an event on Thursday after our recording. Friday, we have to go set up for Comic-Con. Saturday and Sunday is basically 8-10 hours of us meeting and greeting people.
It's a baseball bat to the nuts for hours. Yeah. Like
I don't want it to sound like we're complaining because we absolutely love the opportunity. We really, really do. It's a lot of fun, and we do this podcast because frankly, we're good at it. I mean, we wouldn't have won Best of Columbia in 2023, the inaugural year. I do just real quick want to acknowledge we were runner up for the 2024 Best of Columbia from the Free Times. We did lose to Here for the Health of It with Tom and Randy. They are cultists. I mean, chiropractors. Here in Columbia, and if you listen to their podcast, legitimately they have a lot of interesting people on.
Barrett and I will win at a bare knuckle brawl.
We could both sit on them. I mean, But the good news is they could correct their backs once we broke them. Anyway,
after I'll whoop your ass, you crack your back all you need to.
Still sounds like a gimmick. That is going to do it for episode number 220. Again, thank you, Mal Hyman, for being on. Again, Democratic candidate for Congressional District 7 here in South Carolina. That is episode 220. Wow. Links to past episodes, podcast platforms, merchandise, and social media are all available at our website, theallaboutnothing.com. If you think our financial model of giving away free content and entertainment is silly, and you're in the giving mood, why not become an official Nothinger? To support the show monthly, members can click on the link in our website, or you can follow the links in the show notes. You can make a one-time donation too. So do that. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can call and leave us a message, 803-672-0533. Email theshow@theallaboutnothing.com, or you can join our Discord server. There's a link available on theallaboutnothing.com. That is going to do it. Thank you everybody very much for listening. Guys, good job. I'm in fear of what next week is going to be, but
it's going to be a lot.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot. So
get ready for so much content.
You all, tons of content. You all stay safe, be kind, and
keep your hands to yourself, especially at Comic-Con.
100%.
Right. The All About Nothing podcast is produced and engineered by me, Barrett Gruber. Thanks to Cake for our intro music, Sick of You. You can follow everything Cake the band at cakemusic.com. Thanks to Muff the producer for our outro music. You can follow Muff on Instagram at Muff the producer. I am Barrett Gruber. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Barrett Gruber, or visit my linktree /Barrett Gruber. Want to support the show? Visit our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com, and become a member. There are several tiers available, including memberships that give you early access access to episodes as well as exclusive content. Visit theallaboutnothing.com. To find links to our social media, merchandise, and past episodes, visit theallaboutnothing.com. If you'd like to be heard on the show, you can call and leave us a message. Dial 803-672-0533. If the time between these episodes is more than you can handle, check out our partner podcast. Zach and I host What the Pod Was That with Carrie Simmons. Visit whatthepodwasthat.com for links and details. Me takes a deep dive down the rabbit hole in episodes of Welcome to Wonderland. Available on all the podcast platforms. Visit WTWLpod.com for details. As well, you can listen to the political and social conversation between Dr. Jamela Brooks and Bill Kimmler on Black, White, and Blue in the South. Available wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe and share this show. If you're on YouTube, please like and hit the notification bell. Thank you for listening. The preceding podcast is a product of Big Media and copyright 2024, all rights reserved.